Good morning. Excellent. Just want to make sure you're all awake. Thanks for having me here. It's always a pleasure to be invited to speak at this conference and to see so many familiar faces. And now that I live here in London, I don't have to travel very far to get here, so that makes it pleasant to just come over from Greenwich. So I'm going to talk about traceability and trust this year. It's sometimes a challenge to come up with a theme, but this year this really struck me as something that's very important in our world, something that's very important in our society. So David told you a little bit about me. I've been focused on digital asset management for about the past 13 years, and I've been working in digital technologies since 1995 when I was coding websites a long time ago. And I focus specifically on DAM strategy, product selection, and digital stewardship. I wrote a book on DAM about 3 years ago. I know many of you had it yesterday at the tutorial, so that was very kind. And I work with a whole bunch of different clients of all shapes and sizes, some big corporates, all the way down to some tiny museums. And I really enjoy the range of my work. And even though we have a lot of different sizes and flavors and so many different organizations that are using DAM, the challenges are quite consistent regardless of the size and scope of the organization. So I really love this world, and I love working with creative people. So again, a real honor to be here. When I was a child, I absolutely loved maps. I used to get completely lost in maps. After my mother told me I should go to sleep, I would pull out the Atlas of the World, and I would roam about the countries in it. And then, after a while longer, I would take out that not a wiki encyclopedia, and I would read about all these places I dreamed of going. I would trace the lines on the map, and I would wonder how they got there. Now, for some strange reason, I had this fascination with Greenland, way up there on the top of the world. I thought it was this big, awesome, snowy continent. And then one night at dinner, I was telling my eldest brother, who's 6 years older than me, about how big and awesome Greenland was, way up there on top of the world. And then my world was shattered. My brother, being a big brother, proceeded to explain to me that Greenland was in fact quite small. He showed me that the maps that I had been looking at in school when I was a young girl were in fact just a big lie. How could this be, I wondered? How could Greenland actually be smaller than Australia? It didn't look like that on the map. And yet, I went to school, I saw this map on the wall, and it was wrong. This was what I learned in geography class. How could it possibly be wrong? Well, my mother and my brother explained the Mercator projection, and how, of course, the flatness of the map ended up distorting things the further you get to the poles. This was something, of course, we all learned eventually. There was a mathematician, a French mathematician named Tissot, and in 1859, he called this the indicatrix of deformation. And this was how we characterized the local distortions due to map projections. And you can imagine these projections were very problematic for navigators who were trying to find their way around the globe. So in fact, that big continent up at the top of the world would look very, very different if you placed it on the equator. I was devastated. Fortunately, a few days later, my father bought a globe for the house. Now, even back in the original days of the Mercator projection, when Mercator, the cartographer, was considered the best cartographer in the world, and he was renowned far, far beyond his native Holland, this map was used for hundreds of years. Now, not only was it all over institutions of learning, but in the 17th century, map makers would steal his name. They would put Mercator's name on the map, and then people believed it. So essentially, they stole his brand. They took the Mercator brand, they put it on their map, and it gave it the stamp of truth. How is it that here we are in 2019, and yet his map was that flawed And we still use it, and people still refer to him like he was some arbiter of truth. This, in fact, is the most accurate flat map of the world. I couldn't actually find a high-resolution version of it. And yet it is the most accurate map of the world. This was only created 3 years ago. It was a Japanese artist and architect, Narukawa, who created this map. And it's called the orthograph. Has anyone ever seen this before? Very few people, mostly people shaking their heads. Here it is, accuracy. Accuracy is not familiar to some of us. Accuracy can look a bit weird. It can look like what we're not quite used to. So how did he make this map? Well, this was very interesting. I read a lot about this map. He resolved the traditional map distortion by dividing the globe into 96 equal regions. He transferred those dimensions to a sphere, to a tetrahedron, before generating the final map. So by taking a more mathematical approach, by taking that rounded sphere and turning it into a flat map, sort of unfolding it into a flat map, he managed to maintain the correct proportions and ratios of land and water. So I proceeded to show this map to my nieces and nephews, who are teenagers in school today. And what maps do they still have hanging in their classrooms? Not this one. Mercator's. Mostly. There's some newer projections that are slightly more accurate, but schools aren't using the orthograph. And yet there were all these stories that came out when this map came out. And it's really fascinating. The world is weird and weirdly accurate. What do we say about accuracy? We've been so used to looking at a lie that the truth seems wrong. It seems weird. It seems bizarre. Crazily accurate. It was amazing the adjectives that they used to describe this map for something that was true and accurate and correct. So what does this mean for digital asset management? What does this mean for us who work in this world? Has the truth ever been more important? In a world of fake news, fake imagery, some of you may have seen demonstrations of deep fake technology where they make it look like someone is giving a speech when it's not even them. It's completely simple now to make a famous person look like they're doing something or saying something that they're not. So how can we, as digital asset managers, be arbiters of truth? How can we be instrumental in the spreading of truth in a world that is frankly full of the opposite? Here's one of my favorite stories from the BBC that I read a couple months ago. This man deserves to be publicly embarrassed, so I'm going to do it. He writes fake reviews in his spare time. He gets paid £4 per fake review. And he very proudly interviewed with the BBC. "I've learned never to rely on reviews for anything," says Mr. Taylor from Sussex, who was very proud to spend his spare time getting paid to write false things. And he was proud of it. I'm sure his online dating profile is excellent. What a nut. How disgusting is that? So we need to think about being a source of truth every day when we get up. How is this affecting DAM? Well, digital assets need to be a form of truth. They need to be connected to a supply chain and a blockchain of trust. We need to be responsible for that. The ability to trace and track and audit and validate assets, frankly, has become just as important as the assets themselves. Assets need to be brought together to tell stories, not just of the brand, but actually, where did this come from? What's the supply chain? What's the origin? How did it get to me, and how can I trust it? I often hear, so often, when I work with clients who are unhappy with their dams, the end users, they say, "I don't trust the asset. I'm not sure it's the most recent version. I don't know who exactly created it. I don't know really where it came from. I'm not sure this is the right one." That's a problem. Then your system's not going to get adopted. Then your assets aren't going to get reused. So we need to think about, how do we make sure that we build trust. We need to show the source. We need to show where things come from, not just with the asset, but then that transfers, it moves on, it progresses to our customers. Where was this product made? Where does it come from? And who made it? So using digital assets to build trust in what we do, in our supply chain, in our products, is so important. Assets need to form an arc not just of what we sell, but also who we are as companies. So let's think about an example. Unilever. Anybody here from Unilever today? Maybe? No one's here from Unilever today. Okay. Now, Unilever has a really great logo. And many people don't know the Unilever logo because usually you know the Unilever brands. You know Dove, right? You know Magnum, you know Ben & Jerry's because those are their brands. The Unilever logo is often on the back of the package. But what's really interesting about the Unilever logo is it contains 30 sort of sub-images within that U. And all of these elements actually tell a story about not just who Unilever is, but who they aspire to be every day. So there's a story in this letter and in this logo. Just to pull out a few examples. Dove, we all know Dove. So many of us have used Dove to bathe and clean, and it's all over the world. And so they show the dove within the U, a symbol of freedom, empowerment, and self-esteem. They have a chili pepper that represents some of their food brands and bringing flavor to things. They have ice cream, of course. Who doesn't love ice cream? A treat, a pleasure to enjoy. So this is a logo that's not just a logo. It's a digital asset. It has value. It tells the story of who they are and what they also aspire to be every day. So how do we trace assets in a meaningful way, and why should we do it?
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hi, hello.
My name is Dana. I'll be taking care of you today. If you have any questions about the menu, please let me know.
I guess I do have a question about the chicken, if you could just tell us a little bit more about it.
The chicken is a heritage breed, woodland-raised chicken that's been fed a diet of sheep's milk, soy, and hazelnuts.
Okay, this is local?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna ask you just one more time, and it's local.
It is.
Is that USDA organic, or Oregon organic, or Portland organic?
It's just all across the board, organic.
The hazelnuts, these are local?
How big is the area where the chickens are able to roam free?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I had exactly the same question.
4 acres. Give me just a second. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
She's nice.
What are you doing now?
All right, so here is the chicken you'll be enjoying tonight.
You have this information. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. His name was Colin. Here are his papers, okay?
That's great. He looks like a happy little guy who runs around. A lot of friends, other chickens as friends. Putting his little wing around another one and kind of like palling around.
I don't know that I can speak to that level of intimate knowledge about him. They do a lot to make sure that their chickens are very happy.
When you say they, I mean, who are these people raising Colin?
It's a farm that's located about 30 miles south of Portland.
And you feel, you have a good relationship with this farm?
We do.
But is that some guy on a yacht who lives in Miami?
Oh,
who's
goodness,
just
no.
saying that he's organic?
It tears at the core of my being the idea of someone just cashing in on a trend like organic.
No, I know the type, no.
Yeah.
Tell you what, we're gonna go check it out if you don't mind. Just if you could hold our seats.
Oh, now?
Yeah, and we'll be right back. Just want to make sure.
Just, Thank you so much, Dana.
Sure.
This is from a series called Portlandia, and it's about Portland, Oregon, where there are some people that are a little bit like this, to be fair. So I like this story, not because I'm quite that bad when it comes to where my food comes from, but a few years ago, I decided to get quite intense about eating much healthier and eating a lot more organic food. But like most of us, I didn't have the time to go to 20 or 50 or 100 different grocery stores to find exactly what I wanted. So I found an organic delivery service in Wimbledon called Able & Cole. Anybody an Able & Cole customer here? A few people raising hands? Okay, excellent, excellent. So what I found really fascinating is I would get the food on Monday mornings, delivered right to my door, extremely convenient. And it was very good food. But what was really fascinating to me, in addition to the very good food, was the metadata on every single package. I became totally fascinated by it, and I started to research the metadata that they put on every package. So every label had a traceability code. It told me the exact place where every animal was slaughtered when I got the meat, in case I wanted to go visit it, just like those two people wanted to go see where the chickens were raised. It actually told me how the meat was cut. It told me what part of the Scottish coast my salmon came from. It told me how it was caught. I learned about fishing methods that I never even knew existed. It told me the exact breed of fish. My eggs had metadata. Every single egg had metadata on it, and it even sometimes had feathers. And the carton explained in great detail who raised the chickens, where they roam free, and the exact meaning of the metadata on my eggs. My God, don't we wish our digital assets had this much metadata? Don't we wish that all of our assets were as traceable as this? They're very good at puns at Abel and Cole, cracking the shell on the egg codes. And they would explain the country of Oregon, the organic method. They would tell me the name of the person who raised the chickens. They even made it personal. I learned about forager Aaron, who grows everything and picks everything from wild sea spinach to three-cornered leeks. And then I could go to the website and I could see pictures of the people who grew my food. I could see my whole supply chain. I could see the entire supply chain of my weekly food assets, all the way back to the dirt. It was wonderful. Frankly, it built truth in my supplier. It built trust for me, and I felt better about what I ate. So what does this tell us about packaging? A package, metadata, caused me to learn about fishing. A package caused me to think about the environment. A package implored me to think more about sustainability. So how can we do the same? Not just for the customers of our products, but also for the digital assets that are traveling around our organization. How can we, when someone finds that digital asset, have no doubt and give them no doubt as to the traceability and the trust that's stamped right onto every single asset that they are looking for and that they need to find? I could even share with my friends a picture of Giacomo here, who grows blood oranges in Sicily. And on a Friday night, when I was making blood orange Negronis on a very dark day in January, I could tell a story about where it came from. It was almost like I came up with my own brand story about the cocktails I was making for my friends, because I knew where the oranges came from. And here's the guy who grew them. We need our assets to tell stories. We need our assets to tell stories in dimensions that we've never thought of before. And modern digital assets need to enable a sort of self-expression, a richness of self-expression in whole new dimensions. So why asset traceability and trust is important? Well, DAM fails for a whole lot of reasons. It fails because we don't have enough connectivity to authoritative metadata. It fails because people don't have downstream trust in the assets. It fails because knowledgeable people are not necessarily managing assets day to day. Without this supply chain of the authoritative data, without that traceability, without that trust, knowing who is involved in the creation and the development of the asset, the practice of digital asset management fails. It doesn't matter how much you spend on the technology. It doesn't matter how many dollars or pounds or euros you throw at it. You will fail. So make no mistake. Speed, efficiency, time to market, that's not necessarily the focus of your supply chain. We're always talking about speed. We're always saying faster, get it out faster. If I could go back to Abel and Cole for a second, one of the things I find really fascinating about them is they only deliver to neighborhoods 1 day a week. This is not Amazon. This is not here, now, within an hour, delivery, efficiency. They say we want a low carbon footprint. So because we want a low carbon footprint, we only deliver once a week. We deliver in reusable packaging. You can put it back out, and we will take it in our truck, and we will reuse it. That's their case. That's how they compete. It's totally different. So how do you want to compete? How do you want to engage? That's the metadata on your digital assets. It's not necessarily just about speed. Technology today is often acting as a broker between different systems. So when we think about DAM and creative operations and the different roles that they play, here's a different view. It's not just about DAM. You probably have a project management tool. You probably have staging tools. You probably have rights management tools. You might have a few Google Drives here and there. Right? And you can't necessarily eliminate all those things. You can't necessarily get rid of all of them. Sometimes your DAM needs to be a broker that exchanges content from system to system. The important thing is the traceability and the trust and the consistency. Make the right decisions about what technology does what, and be consistent about it. That's part of the way that you gain and build trust in your digital assets. APIs are the key to all this. Everybody talks about APIs these days, and they throw it out like it's some sort of wizard behind the curtain. You know, it's like we're going to pull back that curtain, and there's going to be a wizard that's going to do everything. That's the API. But the reason I love this particular illustration is because it shows different things that APIs can enable. So you might have another technology that needs an asset collection. Great. My DAM can make that available via an API. You might have another technology that needs access to a particular workflow. Great. I can make that accessible via an API. You might have a different technology that needs some metadata that's in the DAM, or maybe the DAM needs some metadata that's in another technology. This gets exchanged via APIs. We need to eliminate the tedious, manual, annoying work that human beings are doing every day. And the only way we can start to do that is by using APIs for data exchange and consistency and clarity across systems. If we don't do this, we're not going to be able to evolve, and we're not going to be able to build that supply chain of consistency and trust as we move down the path. Okay, one more story. This is about the American packhorse librarians. So in the 1930s, many people living in isolated communities in America, they had very little access to jobs, let alone a good education for their children. So in Kentucky, there were very isolated mountain communities which could only get books and reading material from one source, and it was librarians on horseback. The president of the time was Roosevelt. He was trying to find a way to resolve the Great Depression of the 1930s. So he built something called the Works Progress Administration, and he created these packhorse librarian initiatives to help Americans become more literate so they could find employment. So they were sometimes called the book women or the book ladies or the pack saddle librarians. And they reached over 100,000 people in rural Kentucky. Now these librarians would venture through really awful conditions, snow and mud and creeks and water, because they would sometimes have to go 100 to 120 miles to get the content where it needed to go. They were heroes. And sometimes they'd have to finish their travels on foot, as you can see there on the right, because their destination was in a place that was too remote and too tough for them to go. And there's one of the librarians giving out some books in the town. Now, these women had to be known locally to people, or they would not be trusted. The source of the content, the source of these precious assets that were going to give people potential employment and literacy had to be known, or they would not be trusted. So this project not only distributed books, but also provided reading lessons to people. And there's even a record of one family back in the time that would not move from the county they were in to another county because it didn't have a packhorse librarian. That was how important these people were. Now, why does this matter? Why does trust and traceability matter? You are the vehicle of trust. If you are a digital asset manager, this is what matters in your organization more than anything. You need to build faith in your assets. You need to be an evangelist. You need to make people realize the importance of using assets in a wise way. You should create a transparent supply chain of traceability, just like Abel and Cole does, just like the packhorse librarians did. And you must champion APIs and integration facilities as absolutely instrumental to the future. Ensure that the whole enterprise knows that the dam system is the single source of truth. And finally, you all, your collaborators, and the systems you manage forge a path. You are the map maker, you are the Packhorse librarian, and you are the cartographers of trust. Thank you.